Hi everyone, so today I'm just going to have a quick walkthrough of my current telescope and some of the modifications that I've made to it since I got it and some of the issues that I've had so far. So this is my scope. It's a Bresser Messier NT203, which is an 8-inch Newtonian. It sits on top of an Exos-2 computerized GoTo tracking mount. The telescope itself comes with as standard an 8x50 finder scope, and it also comes with a 26mm lens. As part of my options, I also added a 10:1 fine focus adjustment. This normally sits on the other side, and there's a normal manual rough focuser adjustment on there. However, with this one I've modified the mount to install a Skywatcher electronic focuser, as I found that even with the fine focus adjustment, when I was trying to get real tight focus on the stars, the mount was moving a lot. So I added on the electronic focuser to give me the remote adjustment without having to do hands-on onto the scope. It didn't directly fit, so I had to create this 3D printed mount adapter, and I've put details of that on my website, so you can read more about that modification there. I'll put a link in the description below, and also you can download the file should you want to do something similar yourself off of Tinkercad. So looking down at the mount, we can see that it comes with its own little bubble level just on the top of the head there, and it also comes with two 5 kg counterweights. It also has inbuilt polar alignment. You just take off that to access the lens, and at the other side we just need to unscrew this cover and then rotate the telescope through 90 degrees, and that opens up the window to allow you to set your polar alignment. Engraved on the lens there is also a couple of constellations, so it helps you with setting it up and make sure you're in the right place. And obviously it's still got the little rings as well to try and get the pole star in the correct position. One of the issues I had very early on, I don't know if it's related to the weight of the assembly, but this adjustment screw here, it eventually just locked itself solid, became really difficult to move, and so tight that I actually ended up bending the little adjustment arm. Once I had managed to get it removed, which was pretty difficult, I cleaned up all the threads, cleaned out the hole of all the metal filings, and since then it's really recommended to, if you are making any adjustments, to lift the scope and take a little bit of weight off those adjustment screws. On the GoTo assembly, you've got the two motors for adjusting the telescope position, and just a straightforward push-fit connections for the GoTo controller, your power socket and switch, and there is also an ST4 guiding port. It also comes with an eyepiece holder down at the bottom, and the GoTo handset just sits in this homemade 3D printed holder. Unfortunately you don't get a holder with it, and likewise I created another one here to hold the electronic focuser that I'd added to the mount. Other than that, as a starting scope, it's been pretty good, but I think I outgrew it quite quickly, and the problems I had with the mount sort of put me off it a little bit. Best tracking is typically around about 1.5 minute exposures I can get with it. So as I say, I outgrew that. One of the other things that I also purchased at the same time as I started with was this little set from Omegon. It comes with a number of eyepieces, 4, 6, 12.5 and 32mm, as well as a 2x Barlow, and a number of filters including a moon filter and a polarizing filter. I found that the 32mm was particularly useful at the beginning while I was still trying to work my head around what everything was up in the sky and trying to find all the stars, etc. And then I tend to move down the lenses as I'm going in deeper and focusing in on any particular objects. So the finder scope, it has a crosshair eyepiece, and that was one thing I did manage to screw up. There was a bit of dirt on the lens, and I removed the eyepiece to give it a clean. And inside, I completely forgot about the crosshairs. I thought they were etched onto the glass. However, there were actually a couple of threads in there, and me sticking my big fat finger in there completely destroyed them. So I managed to fix it. It's not very good in terms of perfect alignment, but it's better than nothing. And actually super glued a couple of hairs into the eyepiece to make a new crosshair onto the scope, and that's been working fine. You can see on the top here I've got a little dovetail connector onto the handle. That's not actually supplied with the scope. I added that later for a guiding scope. So the focusing assembly, it comes as standard with 1.25" eyepiece adapter to take it up to the 2". And it also comes with a 35mm extension piece for adjusting the necessary back focus, etc., depending on what equipment you're putting into the assembly. So when I first bought my scope, I didn't own a DSLR camera. I had no idea about any astronomy cameras. So just to start with, to get my hands on the scope and see a bit more about it before spending any more money, I bought a simple mobile phone adapter, which I can just put over the eyepiece, and then it self-centers onto the eye, and then you can adjust as necessary to get your camera on your phone directly over the center of the eyepiece, and then at the back there's just a little locking screw. So that didn't work too badly. It was a bit of a faff to try and set it up each time. I think it depends, of course, what type of phone you were using. I think at the time I was using a OnePlus 7, and I think some of the buttons are sometimes in the wrong place, or the position of the camera wasn't maybe quite sitting level and things like that. But once I got it in place and settled, it worked not too badly. So another piece of equipment I bought right at the start, as I'd read obviously that the Newtonians are susceptible to it, was the collimation. So I bought a simple collimation adapter, and it just sits into the 1.25". This one isn't laser, so all I do is I use my mobile phone with its really bright LED flash, and I shine that down the hole in the centre, and then I can stand with my hand in the rear of the telescope while looking at the alignment hole. I don't know if you can see that there with the light, but that allows me to look directly at what I'm doing while holding the phone down onto the collimator, and that works quite well, and I can usually get it tuned in quite quickly, and I'll maybe do a separate showing of that when I show another video later. So next up is the camera. So after I'd been playing around for a wee bit with the telescope and got familiar with it and starting to really enjoy what I was doing, the mobile phone adapter just really wasn't cutting it for me. And as I said, I didn't own a DSLR and I had no idea about astronomy cameras. So I went looking, and I wanted a mirrorless DSLR. So I went for a Nikon Z50. And at the time, the camera was still relatively new on the market, and I struggled to get battery adapters, etc. So only it comes with one battery, and I was finding that it wasn't lasting too long, maybe 3 hours, 4 hours max, depending on how my alignment went and things like that, in terms of how many photos I was having to take. But nevertheless, it works quite well, and I managed to get some relatively good photos near the start, even though I still didn't really know what I was doing. One thing though was the Z adapter, or the ZT ring adapter. I couldn't get one locally in Cyprus, and they were charging an arm and a leg to ship one to the country, and so I just waited until I was needing a couple of other bits and bobs before ordering one from overseas. So in the meantime I went online and I managed to find a Z mount schematic on the internet on one of the 3D printer sites, and I managed to create a 3D printed prime focus adapter, so I can go straight from the 2-inch onto the Z mount of the Nikon camera. And then I simply mounted my camera over the finder scope, just with its harness there, just in case I accidentally snapped the plastic of the prime focus adapter. But to be honest, it's been worked really well. I haven't had any problems at all with it. For something that was homemade and 3D printed, it's come out quite well, and I was really pleased with that. So the next thing on the list was Coma. So I'd obviously read about it near the start, and there was many recommendations about getting Coma correctors when dealing with the Newtonians. However, there was mixed views on various groups saying, well, it depends how much you feel it affects you and which part of the images you're trying to crop down, etc, etc. However, with the Nikon camera, I was taking some 21 megapixel images, and I noticed quite a bit of the perimeter in the photos. It was obviously the Coma and the stars, really long elongated stars. So I purchased an Explorer Scientific HR Coma corrector, 2-inch, mounts directly into the focuser, and then tighten it down. And the whole idea is once you've set the correct focal distance by putting sort of tape or something across here, tracing paper, etc., you can focus the image onto here, and then you can mount your optical train and adjust the focus of the optical train for fine focus on there. It made a big difference. From there I could just, where's my camera? I've put it down somewhere. Take the prime focus adapter and just slot that in here. I actually have a couple of prime focus adapters of different length for this reason. I just chopped them shorter, but the camera just sat in on there. So that worked quite well, but then it was time to obviously get a proper mount, and one of the things that came with the HR Scientific was proper adjustment rings. So I eventually got my hands on the correct T-ring for the Z mount on the Nikon, and the HR Scientific, it came with a couple of adapters that allowed you to directly down onto the T2, and then with a couple of T2 extension pieces just to get the right back focus, and that gave a lot more sturdy, more secure feeling mount for the camera compared to the 3D printed effort to begin with. So it made me a lot more happy with security of the camera. I still put the strap over the finder scope because there was one night I did forget to tighten these up, and then I slewed the mount and I just heard the whole assembly sliding out the focuser head. Other than that, that's pretty much it for the Coma correction. So now I was looking to control the mount from software instead of using the handset all the time. So I purchased the serial adapter for the Exos-2, which basically consists of just a small serial dongle to USB, and that just plugs into the bottom of the handset, giving the serial control that way. And then I just replaced the standard springy cable with an Ethernet cable to give me a bit of distance to the mount, as they use standard RJ45 connectors. and that allowed me to sit at a table away from the mount and control the mount. The software I'm using, I started off with Backyard Nikon for the camera. However, there was a problem in the early days with Backyard Nikon not working with the Z50 in live view. So I abandoned that and gave up that. And that's when I started using APT and SharpCap more for controlling the mount and for setting up the imaging plans. And that so far has worked pretty well. So I've connected up the handset power onto the mount, and I've put in my rough location details there, and you can see on the screen it's obviously not polar aligned, it's just been set up and pointed roughly where north is. But I've connected up and you can see the handset all lit up. The mount has 9 manual slowing speeds. You can set them just by doing 1, 2, 3 all the way up to 9, and you can hear it moving, see it moving. So it's not too bad in terms of noise and speed. That's on its fastest speed, and then on the slowest speed you can really get some fine movement there. You really can't tell it's actually moving. So typically when I'm moving around have it on 5 or 6 as the slow speed. One of the issues I had, this is actually the second set of motors. The first set, I don't know what happened, but one night the mount decided not to play at all, and it was getting some real bizarre right ascension movement. It would just go wherever it felt like it wanted to go and disappeared off, and it kept wanting to drive at high speed no matter what setting the speed was set on the handset. Some of the other issues I've had relate to the positioning. I still don't fully understand what the problem was, but when it was connected up to software in APT or a couple of the other software, the position relative to the handset didn't really match, and I tried numerous settings. I tried the JNOW, the 2000 or whatever the other settings are, I can't remember now. But sometimes it just wouldn't want to play at all, and I had to go back to using the handset for doing the positioning. So I've never understood what the issue is, plus the issues with the mount. When I've been slowing, I started to lose a little bit of confidence in the mount for doing anything longer than the minute and a half sort of exposures on the camera. There's also quite a bit of wobble. It's quite a top heavy telescope. My personal feeling is that this OTA is probably too large for the mount, and there really is a fair bit of wobble on the head there, but a backlash in the gearing. I know you can do some fine tuning on there, but with a slight breeze you do get movement on the mount. So when I started experiencing the problems with the mount, I'd already placed an order for a guide system. So this is the Bresser AR90S 500mm focal length f5.5 guide scope, and it comes with the full HD camera. However, as I say, with the mount already being what I feel is too heavy, the OTA being too heavy for the mount, there was no way running with the guide scope on this OTA with this mount was going to work. And I'd already placed an order for a new mount to handle the additional weight. I think the rating of the Exos-2 is around about 12.5 kilos, and the OTA plus the guide scope plus the Nikon Z50, and we're already well over that. I think we're pushing over 15 kgs, and I really didn't have any confidence in this mount being able to handle any additional weight. And the balancing, it was also with all that weight, you're right at the limits of the counterweight arm, and there wasn't really a lot of room left or life left on this mount for what I was trying to do with it. So that's when it was time to replace the mount. So it was out with the old mount, and in with the new, a Celestron CGX, and it's like chalk and cheese. This thing is just an absolute pleasure to work with compared to the Exos-2. It's just in a different league, which is not surprising really. Much significant, more load handling capability. The whole thing's a lot smoother. The movements a lot more pinpoint and quieter, and everything is just a lot more sturdy. So I've been very happy with this mount so far. Again, I just connect it up to the laptop, serial connection with the PC connection there, the USB port, and connect it up to the Celestron software, and it's been no problem at all right from day one. I haven't had any issues setting up the alignment. We'll show that in another video, but in case basically it's, you point it to the star, you tell it what star it's looking at, you flip it around, you catch a few different points, and then it calculates how much you pour alignment out, makes you navigate to another star, and then it adjusts the mount, and then you use the adjustments on the mount to bring into the star, back into the field of view, to set your pour alignment. So it's been absolutely brilliant. So in essence, that's a summary of the journey so far in terms of my equipment. I've got a few things coming up, as you can tell from the boxes sat here. A bit more on that in a later video, and really there's not a lot else I can think of at the moment. Put the guide mount back on, and you can see what this looks like with this. See, I don't know if I can do this with one hand, just a second. There we go. So that's the guiding scope on top of the main OTA. I'm sitting on top of Celestron CGX mount. Okay, so that's it all for this time, and thank you very much for watching. I look forward to the next video, which I'm not sure what I'm going to do it on yet, but I've got a few things, as I say. I might do some software, might do some unboxing, but I want to get back under that nice clear sky. So just out of curiosity, that's where I normally set up the scope in the evenings, just in front of those two lights at the front of the path there going up to the house, and that gives me a pretty good clear view of the sky. So this is where I normally set up the telescope, right around about here. North is in that direction, and then it gives me pretty much, apart from a bit where the house is, unobstructed views of the sky all the way around. So that's it. Thank you very much. Speak to you later.